This is Conspirinormal.
Wren, you had some questions you wanted to ask Alan, too.
Well, okay, so this may be getting really, really deep in the weeds, but I know
That's
Alan.
Fine.
So I know Alan is a student of Michael Bertiaux, and I have been reading the Gnostic Gudon workbook. And one really fascinating thing that Bertiaux talks about is the idea of like magical information systems. There's like different systems as magic as almost like magical computers. And particularly, I'm really fascinated by his use of like the Lovecraftian Yuggoth, and in particular, there's this chapter about magical techniques of computer programming where he says, when war is declared against the humanoids by the Yuggothian mutants, the humanoids will not have any magical weapons. All of their weapons will have been taken by us, and our computer will control their deepest eidetic resources. The powers of the Meon and the manifestations of the goddess Yuggoth, the most horrific aspect of Aditi, will then be revealed. At the very deep levels, the esoteric UFOs of Gnostic physics will begin to invade the psychosphere, while above the atmosphere of the materialist and humans will be turned into a field of chaotic negation by the action of the exoteric fleets of UFOs from the planetary systems of the fixed stars. And I just wanted to get your opinion on like some of this, because coming into it from a traditional magical training, like, me being sort of a grimoire magician, doing Renaissance angel magic and that sort of thing, this is like wild beyond compare. I'm just curious, you know probably more about this than I do.
Probably, but only because I consider Bertiaux. Well, I'm not currently involved, and I've never been deeply involved in any of the organizations that he directly set in motion. I hold a charter from Bertiaux for the rights of Memphis and Mitzrayim, but that's a minor charter. He has several organizations that he's assigned to various people. I assume as part of his legacy. He's in his mid to late 80s, I believe, and so he's looking for legacy, as indeed so am I. Hopefully further down the line, but I consider him, with the death of Kenneth Grant, I consider him the best, by far, the best magician in the world. But the consequence of that is his writing tends to be difficult. It took me a year to read the Voodoo Gnostic workbook. A year. And I'll tell you the little anecdotal story about it. If it doesn't, I don't know how we're running on time, but this is a good story, I think.
We got plenty.
Back in the day when even Mr. Waterman, Jim Waterman, as I like to call him, water carrier, James Water Carrier, was friendly to me because I was more compliant in those days. He and Bill Breeze called me to come to New York because apparently after Breeze had recklessly made me an episcopos of the Gnostic Catholic Church, even though I'm not a Catholic or exactly a Gnostic, nor do I've been going to the same temple my whole life. So but I considered it to be like a chaplaincy in Masonic lore, and also the egregore of anything that I get involved in is, useful to me in terms of transmitting energies to others. Egregore is a very powerful thing, and the longer it exists, the more powerful it becomes. That being said, I had been elected by Bertiaux's Ecclesia Gnostica Spiritualis as one of their missionary bishops to Nigeria, whatever that may have entailed. And my landlord was from Nigeria, so I never mentioned it to him though, and he gave me a good letter of reference when I moved over here to the lightning struck tower. So I already had credentials from Bertiaux, and I got a letter from Bill Breeze, and I still have the letter, by the way. So, and he said, I recognize you as a bishop of the Gnostic Catholic Church within the OTO. Well, I wasn't even in the OTO at the time. I was not a member. I was just helping to organize there, and it was not restricted in any way. So I, in effect, was an ecclesiastical member of the OTO, but not an initiate member. So apparently over the next few years, when he was just establishing his office, one of the major officials of the OTO complained, well, he's not been consecrated in the OTO. And by then I was what they call a master magician in the OTO, even though Breeze has said in my presence, in the presence of several other people, the OTO is not a magical order. Then what the fuck are you making? You can bleep that. Are you making magicians and master magicians and charging? Well, that's a different problem. But anyway, so Breeze calls me to New York at his expense and Jim Wasserman's expense. They put me up in a nice hotel. Wasserman was out of town, so I didn't see him on that trip. He hates my guts now, and I hate his, so that's fine. But in those days, it was okay, and he said, a taxi will meet you. Get in the taxi, but don't tell them where you're going. They already know. And I go out to Brooklyn, and across to Brooklyn, I guess it is. And he has this basement apartment. And that was the first time I met Breeze in person, and he was intent on reconsecrating me formally within the OTO because he had already done it as a contract thing. So I said, okay, and we talked about a number of things, and according to my records, he said, this is for life, blah, 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 blah. So I suppose I could even still claim it. Anyway, so he took me into his kitchen, and he had this either bird feeder or water fountain, I'm not sure which, maybe it was both, and he used it to do a little, I believe, impromptu ritual and make me a poobah, the designated poobah for the Southeast at that time. And then he said, well, going back to your hotel? I said, no, I'd like to go to the Magical Child bookstore. I've never been there. Now, I assume at least your older listeners, if any, will know what the Magical Child was. It was like the place to get occult stuff. It was the first place a Gnostic Mass was ever performed in New York. Actually, it was my future lodge master who performed it, and the late Margot Adler, who was the priestess, which she was not a big fan of the OTO later, so that's very interesting. So I went on to the bookstore, and the owner, now deceased, I was mostly interested in getting a ring that would be appropriate to the new office that I held. And he wound up sticking on my finger a replica of the ring of Ankaf Nakansu. I thought that was probably a bit much, but I couldn't take it off. So he charged me half price. So I said, do you carry this book that Michael Bertiaux has gotten out? And he said, yeah, 2 editions, the luxury edition and the regular edition. So I bought one there, took it back to Atlanta, and it took me a full year to give it a proper read. That is, I'm not a slow reader. I must have read some thousands of books in my life, not many thousands, but several thousand. But it took me a year to read it and understand it. The only other thing I can think of is a book on physics, which was much harder because it was radical physics, and I had to really stop on each page and say, is this true? And nevertheless, I got it. After a year or somewhere into it, I got it. First of all, the book needs an index and it needs an editor, unless it was Bertiaux's intention to skip from one thing to another, to another, to another. But the composite, I think, is the only modern magical grimoire that there is. And I learned a great deal from that. Fortunately, my then friend Jack Hogg said, oh, would you like to read that? It's basically the fourth year course for the Monastery of the Seven Rays. I said, that's that thing that was always buying a full page ad in Fate magazine back in the 60s. He said, yeah, but that is from Bertiaux, and I can give you a copy of that. So I read the 3 previous volumes, so I read them back. Well, I didn't read them third, second, first. I read first, second, third, and I'd already read, the Voodoo Gnostic workbook. And basically everything you need to know about magic up to that second level is there. If you have the patience to integrate things that may be in chapter 4, and then in chapter 7, and then back to chapter 3. And the first chapter, I'm not sure that it's not meant to chase people off that aren't serious, because I'm not a lucky hoodoo. Are you a lucky hoodoo? Because you could be a lucky hoodoo too.
Wren, tell everybody what happened while we've been talking here. You posted something on Twitter.
Yeah, I just happened to look over. I've recently taken up in our wonderful quarantine the practice of mycology, and in my mycology setup, I have a humidity controller.
What is mycology?
Growing mushrooms.
Okay.
Perfectly legal mushrooms.
Gotcha.
So anyways, I looked over at my humidity controller, and it was at 93. It's just a
my publisher is going to go through the roof because he says everything is 93 now.
Echo was turned up to 11, bro.
So Alan, I know part of your magical practice, like on your blog and on your website, you talk about Bertiaux's, and forgive me if I pronounced this incorrectly, but I think it's Point Show.
Bertiaux.
The Point Show system. And I was curious if you could talk a little bit about that, or for maybe people who are more magically operant who may be listening to this, is that system worth pursuing, or how have you integrated that into your own practice?
Long story, but look, Bertiaux uses it in the more, don't let the Voodoo part of the title fool you. It's a book that is influenced by his years in Haiti under the tutelage of his teacher. But so it's sort of the way the Hui Shaw, according to my friend Karma, and she's a linguist, so I guess she's right. But over here in the South, we call it the Points Shawed, and it seems to work just as well. In any case, he uses it in a more traditional manner. So somewhere in the early 1990s, I think same guy that did the Spirit Builders that I mentioned earlier, Talpalamas, was nice enough. I found my original notes while I was looking for something else from the early 90s, and he turned it into a booklet, which is, if you want it, I can send you a free PDF of it, because it's not a book as such. And I can't make it into a book because he says he's incorporating it into a book of his with my permission, which is fine. But basically, I started modifying the system with going back and forth with Bertiaux on it to make sure that I wasn't doing something wrong. And what I was essentially doing was trying to find a non-mystery play form of initiation using the 97 points of the Memphis Mitzrayim system of initiation. And
what are those points? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Think of, you know what acupuncture meridians are, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Everybody does now because it's long past trendy, and I'm a big believer in acupuncture. It's similar to the acupuncture meridians, and to some extent it overlaps with them in terms of where they're located on the human body, with the following difference. Other things can be pre-shot too, can be point shot. In other words, objects can be imbued with a point or the points, whatever. But they correspond very closely with the acupuncture meridians, with the difference that there are only 97 known points. I personally believe that, like acupuncture, there are 360 degrees. The word degree coming from the ancient Latin gradus or grade, which is used in magic, or it's basically something of extreme antiquity and refers to the complete circle divided up into 360, which happens to be more or less the rotation of the Earth around the Sun. So it's at various levels, and I have discussed that on my website, which is in the process of migrating right now after, God, how many years? How long ago was 1995?
25 years
Great
ago.
exit.
25 years, yeah.
Boy, you should have seen
Hey
it
man,
back
I
then.
know a guy. I think we can facilitate that a little faster than that.
Well, I tell you what, the bells and whistles I had on that, it was fashionable back then. And a friend of mine has been webmaster for some years, so a lot of the bells and whistles at my request are gone. But and now it's my main squeeze, well, only squeeze really at the moment. I shouldn't say at the moment, not on the air, because she's going to hear this. My main squeeze, and my only squeeze, is a computer, whatever you call people that build web pages, is rebuilding it and into a more professional looking thing. In any case,
what the point showed, like, is the idea that manipulation of these different points on your, like, each one is kind of assigned a different, like, let's say, occult virtue or occult power, and that by manipulating these points, those powers can be utilized or imbued into things?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
The only difference from acupuncture, I think, and they may even coincide with, if you ever figure out what the 300 acupuncture points are, is that acupuncture is entirely for healing purposes. And while the properties of the point shod also have healing properties, they are activation of what amounts to living entities, mostly to be found, at least the way I work them, in the human body. And they are not primarily for healing. I would prefer the laying on of hands if you wanted to do spiritual healing. They're primarily for spiritual illumination, according to the degree of the system of Memphis and Mitzrayim that they correspond to. And that in turn has a kind of 777 set of correspondences that is goes out to an infinite number of columns, just as 777 does. Not the same, because it's not the same number or has exactly the same purpose, but basically you could have for example, a color column or a frequency column, which is probably getting closer to the truth. I think that's the key to Richard Shaver, is to understand that he was an arc welder when he first had these experiences. And probably if you could find out what specific welding equipment he was using and could identify the frequency at which it was welding, you probably could have very, very similar experiences of contacting these, whatever they are. I certainly don't think they're from the inner earth. I think they're on other sides of the portals of one of the two major multi-worlds theories of quantum physics, which is that's way in the weeds for a program, but I think that is the key. It's right here and now, but you have to cross over.
So free illuminism is a way to preserve these visceral reactions and feelings and teachings that you can get in a physical, real life ritual with other people, and to at the same time break down the hierarchical authoritarian structures that you say are a hindrance to preserving this knowledge into the new aeon.
Right, and in turn I can push ahead and hope that if we're successful at doing that in the occult world, that maybe some of the less crazy people, and that's a whole different story, in the broader world will stop playing at angels dancing on the head of a pin and learn how to do that in the greater, wider world. And that's a whole story in and of itself. In other words, if a model can be done successfully, it's a little like the few businesses that have been seized by their rightful owners, the people that work there, and have successfully continued to manage and elect their temporary bosses, that is, facilitators who, organize the day's work for a year and then they have another election.
So it's secret society syndicalism.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm down for that.
Not secret. Occult society syndicalism. And it is actually, and I do use that word, although most of these people are apolitical and they don't even know what the word means. But yeah, it's syndicalist, and even you could argue it's anarcho-syndicalist.
Yeah. If you want to know more about this, Conspirinormal listeners, just go back and listen to the episode where I talked about this.
Yeah, I probably still get emails on that one.
You can't talk about it. It's copyrighted by me, even though I don't believe in copyright. No, I'm kidding. Yes. If you don't laugh at some of this stuff, including Corona virus, excuse me, I get those two confused. You're not going to get through. It's definite. If you get really down about it, you watch a couple of Mel Brooks movies, and you're fine.
One big cosmic joke.
That may be.
Was there any other questions that you wanted to ask, Wren?
I do have one. This is kind of a little unrelated to what we were talking about, but more on the realm of magic. Because reading through your website, you do talk about sex magic. And this show has had a couple episodes on sex magic. So I wanted to just sort of ask. I was recently having a conversation with a fellow occultist, and he was sort of implying to me that sex magic is the only true magic, and that all of the other sort of ritual magic and contacting your HGA and all this kind of stuff was all child's play compared to the true gnosis of sex magic. And I sort of bristled at that idea and thought that was a little outrageous to say. I'm just curious what your opinion on that would be.
Sounds like somebody who really wants to get laid. Well, it's worked for me, so what can I say? Not with the girl at the synagogue way back when, though. Which there are some reasons why they separate the men and the women in those synagogues. Otherwise, boys will be boys. Men are pigs. What can I say? No, I think that's it is a valuable. I was going to say tool, but that is a double entendre with that. It is a valuable instrument. No, there's no word that I can use. The wand and the sword. It's useful if you know what you're really doing and you have years of training in yogic concentration and use it for certain specific purposes. It works very well, but not any better than some other things. There is an underlying truth in that the universe itself has polarity and begins with the Big Bang, aka the Great Orgasm. Think about it. So, you're basically, if you're looking for spiritual truth and finding points at which you can't go beyond, it says it in Latin right on my little slogan on the left-hand side of my Facebook page. So I'll leave it to you to go to my Facebook page. All of you, feel free. You can't join me as a friend now because on high, it has been decreed that you can only have 5,000 friends.
It's only us lucky few that have you as friends.
Well, I'm actually sending notes because all of a sudden, and I'm sure this is, there's one other thing about the Hellier crew. One other thing, it's not just the people that are doing the stuff that is being so excellently, is that a word, documented in the series. It's people who watch it who become part of the initiation. Because I know people out there through various programs that I've done and people who've gotten in touch with me directly or whatever, that they are experiencing synchronicities too and are being motivated to do similar things, to which I say, do it carefully, but this is the way to go. This is an active search for truth rather than a passive search for truth. Or rather than a highly structured search for truth, which isn't a search for truth, it's search for a specific idea, which may or may not be true. So they have the pebble in the pond effect. They have had ripples, and they're still going outward. So be it. I hope there's a Hellier 3.
Let's hope. Hey, Alan, in the time that we got left, man, I'd like to talk a little bit about your new book and what you've written in it, what it's about.
I have a new book?
The latest book, the God Never Does the Same Thing Twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I decided, why not follow in the footsteps of Hunter Thompson in my own way? Because if you followed in his footsteps, you wouldn't be following in his footsteps, if you follow what I mean. Say some stuff without asking myself, is this going to get laughed at? Is this going to look weird? Stuff that I didn't say in other works that I have done. Some of which is shocking, some of which is pretty mild stuff about why archaeology screws itself up with formalism, some of which is literally true and some of which is metaphorical. And I never asked myself, are people going to buy into this? Are people going to believe it? Like the account that I give of General Patton's entry into what was then Czechoslovakia, And the decision to go on himself to Prague, to the Shul, the synagogue that the golem was first raised in, to see if he could find the golem and what happens to him there. It's based on historical fact, but I leave it to the individual to decide where it's going. I tried not to ask myself any questions during the whole course of it. Some of it is straightforward history, some of it is metaphor. I'm not sure if I would do the title again. It is actually a quotation from the Bertiaux Rebbe, who has this interesting group of followers that call themselves the Nachman. He was Rabbi Nachman of Bertiaux. Anyway, he said he was a storyteller. He didn't live a very long life, but he was a storyteller and a good one. And he once said, God never does the same thing twice, which has levels of meaning, I think. I don't want anyone to read the book and think, this is Allen Greenfield's opinions of the way the universe works. It's Allen Greenfield just pulling out the stops and saying stuff. And I figured it was about the time in my life to write one of those. I wrote my history of magic, which there's talk about a new edition of that, but frankly, I had problems with the publisher that I had at the time. And so I had the book pulled. It's, of course, like all of my books, and one or two things that I didn't write, but it's got my name on it, so that's okay too. They've been appropriated by the internet, and they're available as PDFs or whatever from Scribd or wherever you steal books from these days. And who am I? There's no such thing as bad press, Eddie. To quote Martin Landau's Oscar-winning portrayal of Bela Lugosi. And I truly believe that. So that being the case, I just put this out there, and it's me. It may not be all things that I literally believe are true, but it is me. So if you're interested in what gives rise to these other things, by all means, buy it.
Where does that quote on the back of the book come from?
I didn't have any. Let me clear one thing up. Since the 1970s, when I self-published a little book that you can't find anymore called Saucers and Sorcerers, the main point of which was on the cover, which I did not draw. I hired an artist for that. I am not a typesetter. I am not a book designer. I am not a distributor. I am not a wholesaler. Once I write it and someone accepts it for publication, my control over it consists of, are you okay with this?
Yeah.
That's all. So I don't, the covers I see probably later than a lot of people who are reading it.
Well, I can read it real quick. It says, "Arise and grieve not," whispered the archangel. "The day is not yet. One soon shall arise and bring fresh fever from the skies. The Messiah embraces the crescent. You, I shall say, embrace the cross. Sooner than the blinking eye of which the eye of God, both cross and crescent, shall yield the word which a prophet I shall send shall speak. This I promise you."
There's a series of interludes in the book that have to do with the foreshadowing of the Eon of Horus, so-called. I mean, there are other names that would be just as good. And obviously there are a few things in there that are direct references to that. But what I do is I speak of the Archangel Michael clothed in dull gray armor, speaking to various very real people. And in this case, it was, I don't remember, it was either Sabbatai Tzvi, the so-called false Messiah that almost swept Judaism into a heresy in the 1600s, and then himself faced with death before the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire became a Muslim, and that sort of shattered the movement. And then 100 years later, this sex magician claimed to be the reincarnation of Tzvi, and Jacob Frank was his name. And he was a much more interesting person because he certainly anticipated, we're talking about sex magic, he was a sex magician trying to be the Jewish Messiah. And it was those were movements with millions of followers at the time, but that have been sort of buried in embarrassment by the Jewish establishment since then. So I have the angel appearing periodically in the book, telling various people, going all the way up to an actual rabbi who had a learned debate with Aleister Crowley during his American period. That is when he was afraid to get back on the Lusitania because he had some ridiculous fear that it was going to get sunk by the Germans. But, you know, I can't help his cowardice in the face of war. But that is actually the truth. But he had this debate with this rabbi, and I carried it a little further. It's an interesting book to people that have interest in spirituality, in Thelema, in Aleister Crowley, in Jesus of Nazareth, and me.
So what you're basically saying, I mean, so you think it's a coincidence that the angel that appears at a certain point in season 2 of Hellier just happens to be Michael?
No, and it's Michael, for God's sake.
Oh, come on. Michael.
Well, I mean, anybody that does the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram or the greater, if you don't say Michael, the ritual is totally fried, and I've heard it done, you know. On my right hand be Mike, on my left hand be...
You're real.
Or how come all the priestesses for many years suddenly developed a bad English accent? Oh, no. Continuous one of heaven, let it be ever thus. Yeah, bullshit. They're not actors. They should not try to be actors. They're in a mystery play. Mystery play. It's not a religious ceremony. It's a mystery play.
People would to check out good old Poke Runyon and how he does the LBRP.
Oh yeah.
Full YouTube video about Solomonic magic, which is a must-watch for any true student of the occult.
Yes, I've watched it, and he has this interesting little film that's on Tubi, which also has 5 of my son's movies on it. So I keep saying, Alex, you need to get residuals because they're running 5 at a time. Don't end up like Mo, Larry, and Curly in the old actors' home, because they didn't get residuals, and they got like paid for $25 for each 15-minute slapstick comedy, and wound up broke and impoverished. And I feel guilty enjoying their throwing pies at each other and hitting each other over the head.
Sounds like entertainment.
That's entertainment. That's Hollywood. Corporate beasts. Workers of all nations unite. Throw Trump out. No. This was a paid political advertisement, paid for by Friends of Allen Greenfield for President 2028. His slogan will be, if Sanders can run at 80, why can't I run at 80?
Hey, I'd vote for you, Alan.
Yeah, I would too, man, no doubt.
I'd vote for you for
seven others. We would really take but we do a 50-state, okay. Let's not go with that, because some idiot is going to start a campaign, and then I'm in big trouble, I think. How I would run the country? Dissolve it.
Yeah.
My first act, I used to be, have we got 2 minutes for me to do?
Yeah, we got more than that.
Someday, if you care to, I will be glad to do a program that mostly talks about what I never talk about, which is my career as a street activist. Because up until 1992, and I was already 50-ish then, I never voted. I was opposed to voting. I thought any vote is a vote for the system. Mm-hmm. I got tired of seeing Reagan and Bush get elected. So for the first time and every time since, I have voted for the lesser evil, which is the way I regard all politicians. But the point is, in the, what year was it? I guess 1984. Yeah, significant year. When Reagan was running for his second term against God knows which weak Democrat that he was running against, I organized at the ex-church in Atlanta.
Mondale.
Yeah, it wasn't Kerry, it was some other idiot. Mondale, yes, a nice man, but not a presidential material to go against an actor who had his wife whispering in his ear because he forgot a lot of things. By the way, my first wife flashed Reagan when he was running the first time. But anyway, so
nice.
That year I came up with an ingenious idea that I took to my affinity group. I said, let's get a couple of the bands that we're sort of in line with. One was Little Disgusting to School Children, and the other was Neon Christ. From the names, you get the idea of what kind of band they were in the 1980s. And Rent the Existentialist Church, which was affiliated with the Universal Unitarian Church, but was called the Ex-Church, and rightly so. And have a concert, a free concert on election night with the advertisement, admission free to those who don't vote, and $5 for those who do. And it was a big success, but then, it was the last time I did it because I thought, well, you can be an advocate for revolution, but it ain't gonna happen quickly. And in the meantime, there are people who will press the button and people who won't. And that should be your criterion. And I have voted ever since, but I am still a philosophical anarchist and have anarchistic intent.
Yeah, I'd love to hear you talk more about that, because I know you were talking about
in public.
you were talking about not being a great typesetter, but I found an issue of a zine that you were involved with. I thought it was great.
What was the zine?
Is it okay if I say the name?
Never heard of it.
Okay. The Circle A.
Never heard of it. Never heard of it.
It is possible to find, I think, issue number 4 online if you have good Google skills. But it's very entertaining, and I love seeing it because I'm just like, I've only had a sort of political awakening in the last probably 4 or 5 years, and it's cool seeing that there were people thinking the same things back in the 90s and even before, because I think a lot of the time I think of the early 90s as this sort of completely dry period. for.
I think those were all
Not
in
at
the
all.
80s. But yeah, that's good. Can I tell you when I stopped thinking that street anarchism was a good thing, or that it was premature? At the 100th anniversary of the unfortunate hanging of the Haymarket martyrs in Chicago, there was a huge effort worldwide to bring as many people who self-identified as anarchists and our RCP hangers-on, who were always looking for converts for their little tiny franchise, come to Chicago and have a march, a commemoration, whatever we could do. And we were mostly staying at this church that opened up its basement to us, which was a huge, used as a meeting room. And we had 1,000 people there. I think that was the largest purely anarchist gathering in that period of history or any time in recent history. And we were eating dinner, and at that time I was a vegetarian. I'm not a vegan, but a vegetarian. But that was not a political position for me. That was what I considered to be the ethical and healthiest way to go through life. And we had a group of armor IWW meat cutters who were on strike, who mistakenly thought that their being there and their being appealing for our support as a, quote, group would be more than welcome. And while their spokesperson, the union shop steward, was speaking, he got interrupted by a group of anarcho-vegans who put their hands up on their heads like horns and started going moo, moo, and passing out. All of them were passing out leaflets about the evils of eating animal flesh.
Way to go to alienate the working class, like the left has been so good at since then.
Anyway, they arrived at my table. And handed me one of their leaflets while they were moving on by. And I got up on the table, which was, I must say, most of the people around it were members of my own affinity group, so I knew I wasn't going to be tracked with too much. And I took the leaflet and theatrically tore it in half and threw it on the floor. Suddenly I was surrounded by angry, hungry-looking vegans who saying, "Why did you do that? That was just theatrical." And I said, "What you're doing is theatrical, and people here are here for one in common reason, which is that they all think the state is a bad idea." And it ranges way across the board from people who are borderline libertarians to people who are borderline nihilists. And in order to bring us together, a certain amount of camaraderie and tolerance is necessary. I did it to be theatrical. You did it to be theatrical. And the guy goes, "Oh, well, since you put it that way, I understand." But from that day on, I went home, I wrote an essay called Control Systems and Social Change. And I continued to be involved for a while, but I just didn't have my heart in it. Because what I said was, what we need is political education before we do anything else.
It's definitely not lost that so many anarchists can be just as authoritarian, or if not more.
Exactly. That was the way that I saw it. And or people that call themselves anarchists, but who obviously have some other hyphenated cause that they care about. I would call myself an anarcho-syndicalist, but I'm not pushing syndicalism as a separate thing, but as a means to an end. That is, if you want people who labor to be in control and exercise their own democracy, and aren't stupid enough to call it a Soviet, which is an accurate word, but carries bad connotations for which we can thank Stalin and Lenin for. The reality is, wow, the corner of my thing just said Adam is recording the call.
For the show, yes.
Oh, yeah.
We are making a show.
You mean we're on the air? I thought this was mine eyes have seen the glory of oh, beautiful. Everybody join the for space, the skies. And beautiful. My country. No, that sounds too English.
God, just say God real loud. God bless America.
Yes.
Yeah, God bless Trump. May he continue to be what he is.
That the Lord would choose such a fallen, imperfect man to fulfill his destiny.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm sure with all those people praying for him, he'll be in one of the medium hells, not, not down there with Saddam Hussein and Hitler and
somewhere a little higher in Dante's cosmology.
Yeah. He gets just beaten up every day by his victims. Okay. This show has definitely gone in places that I didn't.
Hey, this is
what
great.
We wanted.
That's
what we wanted.
Yeah, absolutely. This is great.
Okay, this is going to make the Hellier people never want to talk to me again.
That's why we got Wren on here, too. So.
Yeah, I mean, no, this is great because I really wanted this show to go places that I haven't heard other interviews you were on go.
Exactly.
Like a lot of the interviews I listen to you on, like people just kind of ask you the same stuff over and over again, and they never really ask you the interesting questions. So that's why I wanted to be on.
Oh, they ask, but you will notice I never give the same answers.
We might have to split this up into two. I don't even know.
Spontaneity.
We'll figure out how we want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
This has been really, really excellent, guys. I really appreciate it.
Well, speaking as Bill Breeze, let me say that I've enjoyed being on your program, and I will continue to be Bill Breeze as long as they let me. Thank you.
Excellent.
Posing as Allen Greenfield, that nefarious, radical, confused, pathetic human being. Bill.
I guess
William Gary Keith Reeves.
I guess really to ask you guys,
America, even though I'm French, which he is.
I guess really to ask you guys, like, what's next for y'all? Wren, Alan, what's next, guys? What are you working on? Molotovs? Yeah, probably.
I'm too old for that. But
I'm not.
Yeah, you're not.
Next is the ordeal of doing Timothy Green Beckley's show.
Oh.
With Tim Swartz.
Yeah, well, Beckley, you guys go way back, don't you?
We go back to 1962.
Oh, man.
Yes, exactly. Tim and I were teen ufologists together, and we have been
shit.
many.
We get you guys together.
Yes.
Yeah, we're. I call him my oldest friend, but that's a double entendre if I've ever heard one. Thank
Red,
you.
what about you?
Right now, my big projects are still just attempting to bring parapsychological and magical equipment for study and exploration to the masses, free of charge and open source. Like I've spent the last 3 days going over research papers by Michael Bertiaux about the Koran helmet or the God helmet. because I want to like build one from scratch, and I want to provide plans for other people to build their own instead of having to pay some random person on the internet $700 for one. Because I'm pretty sure
you want to build two, one for you and one for your really good buddy Allen Greenfield.
Definitely, and I'm also trying to build like a DIY version of the Lucia light machine or the Pandora Star light machine that's supposed to induce out-of-body experiences, because they're like $20,000, and it's just a bunch of LEDs and like a halogen bulb. Like, there's no reason it costs so much money, and it's ridiculous, and that kind of stuff really, really boils my blood. So I don't want access to this type of equipment to be limited to people of means. I remember talking to one of my fellow magicians, Sam Block, recently, just privately, and he mentioned, I was kind of lamenting the fact that all the materials to build the Trithemian, table and pedestal and stuff are so expensive, because it's like ebony and gold and all these expensive materials, and he said, this isn't the poor man's art, and he was joking. I mean, very true though. It's true. Yeah, it's very true, and I don't think it should be that way. I think it should be for everyone. Magic is for everyone. So that's what I'm working on right now, and just like trying to build these tools and to provide my plans and how I did it, and just to get this stuff into the hands as many people as possible.
Can you make a $10 cardboard dream machine that you can play on 45 RPM on a standard record player? That would be.
No, but
I think that would be the most democratic thing I could
think
of. Yeah.
I'll look into it.
The amazing psionic machine costs nothing to make. You just make it. It's just a piece of tin foil wrapped around a piece of cardboard as the platelet. And then you have a schematic of a real machine, and you turn the platelet, and you get different effects according to it.
Oh, you're talking about like the radionics machines.
Well, it was called the Amazing Psionic Machine originally. Yeah. It started off, I think it was what was his name, Joseph Campbell? No, other Campbell. The one that did science fiction magazines.
I think Peter Levenda talks about it in Sinister Forces. Like, it's this like somehow you can get actual electrical measurable effects out of a drawing of a schematic. Not even an actual like piece of electronics, just a drawing of one.
That's right.
What was that ancient occultism when people were just writing on parchment? Isn't that the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like those things look cybernetic.
Mm-hmm.
And don't forget, like, on parchment.
I mean, the symbols of goetic demons look to me, when I look at that, I see schematics,
Well, it's cheaper anyway, and if it works, that's just fine. I can think of a million uses for it right now. They're going through my head, and I'm suddenly very secretive.
Okay.
I want to turn something off. It has nothing to do with your show. Oh dear, what happened to the general, so to speak?
All right, guys. Thank you so much. This has been awesome.
Thanks a lot. Where should people look for where should people first go on the internet to contact you, Alan?
Well, my girlfriend, Michelle, is revising my 25-year-old site, and it should be up in a matter of days now. So it will have a lot of the same stuff that was on the old site, but in a totally new format. And who knows what? It'll be up to date on books and things. And I presume she's checking all the links for dead links. So that should be up in a matter of days. And I think she's switching so that it instead of being what it was in the 1990s, which was hellfire@mindspring.com, which is still up as far as I know, because that reflected things that I was into at the time, including my attempt at a revival of the infamous Hellfire Club. And that certainly doesn't apply to anything that's on there right now. But I think it's just under allengreenfield.com or something like that. I'll announce it on my Facebook page.
And all your books are available on all the platforms, pretty much.
It depends. The ones that are in print you can still get the Complete Rite of Memphis. I don't think I get royalties on that anymore. But
can you recommend any places that are the best places for people to purchase books?
Any of the usual outlets, I think.
Cool.
Albris, Barnes and Noble, which, by the way, I think they've closed a lot of their stores for the apocalypse. And Amazon certainly has it, and Amazon Europe has it because, that's also true as far as I know of God Never Does the Same Thing Twice. And those are the only two that I still, I don't get royalties as far as I know on Memphis, but the more people that get it, the happier I am. And if they get the revised edition, in the back of it, it brings it up to date. So you don't just have the formulaic Yarker versions of the rituals. You get a way of working with it, strictly using the Puishot. Although I will caution people that you need not to go into that cold. It needs to be properly prepared for by one of several means, but it's all explained in the appendix to the book. And of course, thanks to the great work of others, including my publisher, Olin Phillips, and my other publisher, Blue Star Press, these books are available pretty well anywhere, and especially in terms of sales, people are buying the Complete Secret Cipher of the Euphonauts. That's both books together, cheaper, like hotcakes. I mean, they're considering that the original Illuminate Press edition has been gone for decades. This is having tremendous sales, and so I'm very happy that it's out there, and I do, owe a huge debt to the Hellier people for popularizing it, and also because what I wanted to happen back in the day was I thought people would work with it, and there would be, books by other people that said, I worked with this cipher, it works, and here's the experiences that I had with it. It didn't happen. It's happening now. Other people are having these experiences, and I expect within a year or so, there's going to be a book or two that eclipses the work that I did, and I will consider that I have made a real contribution to understanding what all of these phenomena are really all about.
Wren?
Yeah, so we got a lot of noise.
Yeah, there's a lot of noise going on.
Alan brought it. Alan, what did you do?
I detect there being a tree in your path. By the way, when I was out running last night, no, it was night before last, there was a balloon in a tree next to the road, and I would have tried to get it, but it was way up in the tree. I wanted to see at least what it said, because I've never seen that myself before. I mean, I've seen balloons, but in buildings or whatever. But the pollen is so thick. All these beautiful flowers in bloom, but I am allergic to everything. And pollen is the second worst there is. So every spring, it's just difficult for me. But I didn't get the balloon, but it made me think of Hellier and the.
Oh yeah. Yeah. What color was it?
I couldn't see it's. I avoid people because of the coronavirus, and I don't have any protective equipment, so I don't go out and run or ride my bicycle before midnight when nobody is around, and therefore it was off in the woods a little bit. Like a few days before that, I saw an opossum trying to get away from me up in a tree, like I was going to chase it or something. You know what?
On the bike.
Yeah, you know what squirrels do? They go around the tree where you can't see them, and if you look around the tree, they go in further around it. I say, I'm not out to hurt you, little possum. Dinner. I'm a nice guy. I don't like vegans though. No, actually, I do. Some of my.
They don't have such illuminated people on bicycles coming through every day on their block, so
yeah,
they get a little taken aback.
And not at the speed that I go at. So.
Well, this has been awesome, guys. Stay on the line for us.
Wren, where can we find you, though?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I have a blog at liminalroom.com that is frequently updated. If you want to find me on Twitter, where I post more frequently, that's at liminalbird. And if you want to play around with the secret cipher of the Ufonauts, after you buy Alan's book and read it, you should check out naeq.io, which is a tool that I created with the help of my friend Alan, where you can put in words and it will output values and numbers for you, and you can do your own investigations using that.
And it's excellent. I think it is the best to come along since Lexicon. There are a couple of good ones out there, but it's Wren has come up with the best, and it is. I think it's going to become the dominant. I call it the decoder.
Decoder ring. Yep.
Well, I'm not going to call it that because then Captain Midnight will be sued.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. This has been excellent. Stay on the line for us, and we'll be back to close out the show very briefly on Conspirinormal. All right, guys.
That was fun.
That was a lot of fun. So, Wren, I guess you could just help us. Well, I guess Surfiel, what did you want to talk to Wren a little bit more about some stuff or what?
Oh, I don't know, man. I'm pretty blown away. I don't know.
Okay. Well, just help us close out the show, Wren. I guess
all right.
We'll do it that way, and then
okay.
I guess we'll all go our merry ways. So that was a long interview with Allen Greenfield.
Might be
This
2
one-
episodes.
It could be. Maybe. We'll see.
I think it might need to be.
Yeah. Okay. That's fine.
We'll see.
We'll see. We'll see how much material we got, because I think at one point
we've got our. Go ahead. What?
Well, I think at one point you sent me the thing that said it was like we were about 3 hours.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I sent you periodic text just saying, just keep them going, just keep it going.
Yeah.
Because I wanted everybody to just feel free to express themselves tonight. Is great. That's what I wanted, a real free form thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I appreciate, you guys invited me on to talk to Alan, because like I said earlier, there's a lot of questions that I don't hear people ask him, and this is a man with a wealth of knowledge about the early history of ufology, about like the occult. A lot of people forget that he's also a practicing magician who knows a lot about the occult and has had ties to some of the most important occult figures of the modern era. So
absolutely.
The secret cipher stuff is cool.
Yeah, a lot of people listening to Conspirinormal, I think, are really hip to a lot of stuff. They want to get, into the weeds.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to really give that to him.
Yeah. He just has such a wealth of experience, and just like we talked about just like a gamut of subjects tonight, and we kind of got him on his whole like social activism back when he was young.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely want to hear him talk more about that.
I don't think anyone's talked to him about that.
Really, I mean, the only time I've ever heard him talk about that at all recently is, I think he was doing an interview with Paul West and some other people where he kind of briefly touched on it, but not at the level he did even on this show. And I would love to hear another show with him talking more about his activism and talking about, like you guys mentioned, his UFO cases that he's went out and studied. Like he said, he had a Pascagoula story that I've never heard, and I would love to hear it.
Yeah, it seems like he's just like his political views and his views on occultism and all that just kind of go together in the same way that yours kind of go together, Wren.
Yeah, definitely. That's why I've been so interested in his work, and have talked to him both on shows and privately about this kind of stuff, because like we talked about on the show, I don't think those things are necessarily I don't think they're mutually exclusive,
Right.
Right. I was trying to dig in a little bit, and I wanted him to get a little more into the weeds with that stuff. Whereas, as far as like actual secret societies and their role in these different revolutionary epics, and where they're at today, and this idea of the White and Black Lodge, are these also, is this duality also a representative of the political system, and really into the weeds on that stuff.
He talks a lot in Secret Cipher about the Knights of Malta in particular.
Yes, absolutely.
More about that.
Yeah. So that's cool, but we got plenty of time to do more shows with that one.
Yeah, and let's hope that we can. That I know the situation right now. Everything's really weird and everything's really up in the air. But hopefully we can pull this conference off and we can make it happen. We'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
for
like
everyone to get to meet Alan in the flesh and see him in the flesh. That'd be great.
Yeah. Right. God willing, this stuff will be taken care of by then. I'm really hoping for it, because I'm looking forward to the conference.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, we'll find a way. I think we'll find some way.
Thankfully, it's not only like 1 or 2 months. It's we got a little bit.
Yeah, we got a good little bit chunk of time. So we will see. All right, guys. Well, that's it. Patreon is up. We've been doing pretty regular episodes on that. We pretty much have like a 2-parter now on like Echo the Dolphin.
We responded to that
John Lilly, which is really interesting.
To that real popular response to that episode. So we've got another one where we're continuing it.
And Rob joins us.
Yes,
on that episode too. Yeah. So if you're interested in finding that, that's patreon.com/Conspirinormal. Join us on there. Everything's on there. Is like you can get access for $1 if you want to throw us more, help us out, and you're going to get access to at least every week. And there's about, I think, 40 something posts on there by now, something like that. So there's a lot there. YouTube channel, Conspirinormal Podcast. Also, sign up there, give us a subscription. And I think that's it, guys.
Awesome. Well, thanks for inviting me.
And, whatever it's going to be.
Yeah, sir. Thanks for coming on, man.
Everyone stay safe. To all the listeners, stay safe, stay healthy, stay frosty. We'll get through this.
We will get through this. All right, guys. Thanks for listening, and we will be back next time on Conspirinormal.
would like to help the show, please consider becoming a Patreon at www.patreon.com/Conspirinormal or leave a one-time donation at Conspirinormal.com. And please check out our YouTube channel, Conspirinormal Podcast.